Hey guys, I'm bringing back the face cam for this video because it's a special occasion. I'm going to be reviewing Link's Crossbow Training for the Wii, in honor of Zelda Month, a tradition started by Peanut Butter Gamer. Now this game was released as a spin-off to Twilight Princess, but it was also made to sell this little piece of plastic, the Wii Zapper. So, how does the game hold up? Is it a good spin-off? Is it fun on its own? Let's check it out. Normally I start the review off with the story, but Link's Crossbow Training doesn't have any, not even in the manual. Considering the kind of game this is, that isn't really an issue, but a simple line of dialogue saying something along the lines of, after defeating Ganondorf, Link journeyed across Hyrule to continue training with his crossbow, or something like that, would have been nice. It's not really a problem that there is no story though, so let's just move on to the presentation. Link's Crossbow Training takes place in the world of Twilight Princess, and as a result, reuses a lot of assets from that game. Pretty much every location and enemy is taken from Twilight Princess, so if you're very familiar with that game, it can come across as shallow and lazy, but I personally find it really fun seeing Link practice with his crossbow in familiar places. To be fair, they could have theoretically made the spin-off based on any Zelda game, but I personally think that using Twilight Princess as a basis for the spin-off just makes sense. It was the most recent Zelda game at the time, so basing it off of Wind Waker or something wouldn't have really made any sense. As a side note, Twilight Princess is not only my favorite Zelda game, but one of my favorite games of all time, so I may be a little biased in that I don't personally mind this game reusing locations and assets from that game, but I don't really think it detracts from the game in any way. It makes it feel more like a Zelda game to have Link riding Epona through Hyrule Field while shooting down targets in the distance, or for a Link to be fighting off Moldorms in the Gerudo Desert or Moblins in the Hidden Village. Even though it's a spin-off, the game definitely feels like a Zelda game. There's plenty of attention to detail here, like how there are these giant roasting meats in the Moblins' hideout, just like there were in Twilight Princess. The music is also all ripped straight from Twilight Princess, which again, I don't personally have a problem with since that game's soundtrack was really good. The songs are all appropriately placed in this game and go a little towards immersing the player in the game, even though it's just a spin-off. Overall, despite the heavy reuse of assets and music from Twilight Princess, the game's presentation is solid. The same amount of attention to detail was put into this game as the game it was based off of, so that makes it feel like a real Zelda game, and for that I can commend the presentation. Right off the bat, when you start Link's Crossbow Training, you're given the option of Score Attack, the game's main campaign, Multiplayer, and Practice Mode, which lets you practice any level from any stage that you've unlocked. The game also features options for adjusting the default cursor height and sensitivity, which is really great. Being able to adjust these things made the game a lot more comfortable to play, and considering how sensitive it is by default, having the option to turn it down some is a godsend. However, there's a bit of an elephant in the room in regards to the controls, and that's the piece of plastic I mentioned earlier. Link's Crossbow Training originally released in a bundle with the Wii Zapper, and I'll tell you right now, it's all but required that you have one to get anywhere in this game. Fortunately, I do happen to own a Wii Zapper since I bought the bundle for this game when it came out, but if you don't have one and don't plan on buying one, this game isn't really worth bothering with. Playing with just a Wii Remote and Nunchuck is all but impossible. To put it into perspective, I was able to get upwards of 50 to 60,000 points on the target practice stages with the Wii Zapper, but when I removed them, I could barely scratch 5,000. Considering the game was made with the Wii Zapper in mind, it really is a testament to just how well the Wii Zapper works. For a little piece of plastic, it sure does give you a lot more stability while aiming. Bottom line, if you plan on trying this game out, make sure you have the Wii Zapper to play it with. I can't state enough just how much harder it is to play this game without it. Setting up the Wii Remote and Nunchuck into the Zapper, however, is really cumbersome and annoying. You have to wrap the wire behind this little plate in the back and then loop the Nunchuck through this hole so there's no extra wire dangling around. Once you do have everything properly set up, however, the Zapper itself is surprisingly comfortable. After about an hour and a half, though, it started to cramp up my right hand. I'd recommend only playing the game for about an hour at a time so you don't get too uncomfortable, but I'd take a little bit of discomfort alongside the precision aiming the Zapper allows for any day. Gripping my hands onto the controller also made for some pretty intense moments where I was trying to stay as still as possible and not mess up while going for high scores. Anyway, that's all I really have to say about the Wii Zapper itself, so let's actually talk about the game now. Just to get this out of the way now, while the game does support multiplayer for up to 4 people, I only own one Zapper and don't have anyone else to play this with, so I can't really comment on if the multiplayer is good or not. I can't really imagine anyone having 2 Zappers, much less 4 of them, so I'm not sure if anyone would be playing the multiplayer in this game. Regardless, I guess it's a nice touch that they added multiplayer at all. The main campaign has 9 levels, each with 3 stages. The stages will usually be either a target practice stage where you shoot targets in an on-rails level, a defender stage where you stand in the center of a circle shooting enemies, a ranger stage where you freely move around in an area to find and kill all the enemies, and the occasional boss fight. The target practice stages will always be first in each level as they're the easiest to understand. These stages will have you shooting targets as they appear, and shooting multiple targets in a row without missing will increase your multiplier, giving you more and more points for each target you hit consecutively. You also get triple the points for hitting a bullseye on a target, so these are really easy stages to rack up a ton of points on. Scattered throughout pretty much every stage in the game are environmental targets that aren't required but can get you some extra points. Sometimes a gold rupee will pop out of one, which can get you even more extra points, but its point value will decrease the longer you take to shoot it. You can also find a fairy, which just gives you a free 1000 points. It's kind of redundant to have both the rupee and the fairy since they basically do the same thing, but that's a very minor nitpick. The target practice stages will also have these little scarecrow guys that you can shoot in the stomach up to 8 times to inflate their head. Shooting every scarecrow 8 times in a level will sometimes reward you with a secret path at the end of the level where you can get even more points than you would in the normal path. So it's a nice reward for exploring in a sense. The defender stages are easily my least favorite. The limited visibility makes them pretty annoying, but the minimap helps to alleviate this a little bit. It's also very difficult to rack up large scores on most of these stages since you typically need to shoot very small targets that move around very quickly, and you'll also often find these green glowing enemies that give you a rapid fire power-up. It's a nice power-up and can be really useful for taking out big waves of enemies, but there's no chance in hell you'll keep a combo when it's activated. It can also be a bit annoying to move the camera around since it pans pretty slowly. These stages aren't bad, but they are my least favorite part of the game. My favorite stages are by far the ranger stages. Walking around a small arena and finding tons of secrets is really fun. The minimap comes in much more handy here since you can use it to find hidden enemies and secret pathways as well as showing you where any enemies that you might have missed are. As for the bosses, they're decent. There are only 2. One is the last stage of level 8 where you fight a Darknut in the Temple of Time, and the final boss where you fight the Fossil Stallard in the Gerudo Desert. The Darknut fight is pretty simple. Wait until he swings his sword and shoot him a few times. Repeat until his armor falls off, and then shoot him with a bomb arrows until he explodes into a bunch of tiny birds. Then shoot the 3 white birds. From there, just a few bomb arrows is enough to take him down. It's a short and simple fight, but considering there's a time limit and that you get a 5,000 point bonus for every second left on the clock at the end, having the boss easy to take down with the right strategy is a plus in my book. The final boss is a bit harder though. To defeat the Fossil Stallard, you have to wait for him to open up the weak spots on his hands and shoot his arms off to reveal the weak spot on his head. Each phase gets a little bit harder, with his hands moving faster and more enemies being thrown into the mix. After 3 phases, he goes down for good, and the game just sorta ends. No credits sequence, no cutscene. It just takes you back to the level select like it was any other level. That's not all there is to do in this game though. Being a score-based game, of course it has medals for reaching certain point thresholds. You only need 20,000 points in each level to beat the game, which is piss easy, but each medal after that will require another 20,000 points. Getting 80,000 points in a level will net you the highest reward, a platinum medal, so the game does offer plenty of replay value if you go for all the platinum medals. Unfortunately, you aren't rewarded in any way for getting platinum medals on every stage, but for the most part it's pretty fun to try and get really high scores, so I'd say that it's worth going for, especially since just playing through each stage of the game only takes about an hour. My 100% run through the game took me about 3 hours, so while it's not a particularly long game, it definitely didn't overstay its welcome, and I had plenty of fun with it. There are really only a handful of very minor issues that I have with this game. For one, I had a brief moment where my Wiimote stopped working entirely, even though the light indicating that it was connected as player 1 was still lit up. Only disconnecting and reconnecting the nunchuck got it working again, but that could be an issue with the Wii Remote itself or my Wii U, but I'm not sure. Second, I came across an invisible wall in the Skulltula Forest Ranger stage that unfairly dropped my combo and cheated me out of a platinum medal. It's a very minor issue, but it's still pretty annoying that I had to do the entire level over again for the platinum medal. Third, the Death Mountain target practice can be really annoying with the very strict time limit and the overly long and drawn out rolling animation that the Gorons do every time they switch out the targets. The stage in particular got really annoying to redo over and over for the platinum medal, but it's still a pretty minor complaint. Finally, the load times. While not terrible, they're noticeably pretty slow, and sitting there on the level select screen waiting for the prompt to start the level to come up can get pretty tedious when you're constantly restarting over a simple mistake in the first stage to get the platinum medal. There was also a weird instance where I zoomed in at the very start of a level and got a glimpse of something I don't think I was supposed to see, but again, this is a very minor complaint. Overall, Link's Crossbow Training is a great game and a worthy spin-off. It takes familiar settings from Twilight Princess and makes a fun, addicting, and satisfying game out of them. It absolutely nails what it's trying to do, and for a spin-off, that's all you can really ask for. It may be a pretty basic game with a non-existent plot, unoriginal assets for visuals and music, and only 9 levels, though each contains 3 stages. But for the limited scope that it has, it's a well-executed and fun game with only a handful of very minor technical issues. The only thing that keeps me from recommending this game is that you really need the Wii Zapper to play it, but you can find it online for about $5, as well as the game itself only being around $4. Altogether, that's a bit much for a game that barely lasts more than an afternoon, but if you have the Wii Zapper already, or the game and not the Zapper, picking up the supplementary item to give the game a proper try is well worth it.